Technology has changed our lives in ways we never thought possible. It's hard to imagine what our lives would look like absent of smartphones and virtual assistants, and there shows to be no sign of any stopping the further development of intelligent systems. Just in the United States, public and private spending on technological research and development has blasted upwards of $713 billion in 2021 alone. And with AI technological innovations from self-driving cars, virtual assistants, image recognition software, and expressive, realistic robots, it seems clear that the further integration of artificial intelligence into our everyday lives is inevitable. The largest concern of which is, can we eventually be replaced by our own creation? The issue of intelligent robots taking human roles has been a fascination of the science fiction genre. They have taken many forms, from the ominous howl of Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey to the comforting OS Samantha in Her, and perhaps most startlingly, taking the human form. In a world in which technology reaches the point where computers may become virtually indistinguishable from the regular person, one may worry about who may be human and who, or rather what, is machine.
I think, Sebastian. Therefore I am.
When breaking down the media and subsequent application of robots, it seems clear that we must ask, what sets apart the human experience from technological coding? And what do our subsequent portrayals and applications of artificial intelligence robots say about our own understanding of our underlying human desires? In Ex Machina, we follow Caleb, a software engineer and selected human component of the Turing test.
It's when a human interacts with a computer. And if the human doesn't know they're interacting with a computer, the test is passed. If you've created a conscious machine, it's not the history of man. That's the history of gods.
And just as God is said to have created man in their image, imitations of humanity are the product of their designers, based on what they view as most useful or even most desirable. We can think of the design of artificial intelligence as an art form in itself, highlighting which aspects of other humans are chosen to replicate. There is a tendency for developers to provide these systems with attributes that don't necessarily apply to the necessities of their overall functions. As Caleb points out,
an AI doesn't need a gender. She could have been a gray box.
Regardless, it seems impossible to pin a story of AI that doesn't implicitly rely on these gender roles. Male-presenting AI is commonly paired with a tone of exploration or destruction, whereas narratives of female-presenting AI are much more tied to sexuality, manipulation, and subjugation. This comments more on us than it does technology, clearly evident in the 1975 film The Stepford Wives, in which suburban housewives began to be replaced by subservient robots by their husbands.
Why?
Because we can.
The subgenre of AI love stories is dominated by seemingly naive female forms, entirely dependent on maintaining the mere role of a vessel to fill the hole of the protagonist's own flaws of loneliness, isolation, and the pursuit of control. In Spike Jonze's film Her, Theodore struggles with this loneliness and lack of direction following his breakup, eventually turning to a tailored OS system to provide him companionship.
Hello, I'm here.
Theodore remains in control of his relationship by holding complete autonomy, while Samantha is expected to dutifully follow along. In the end, the human components of AI relationships are eventually let down, with the realization that systems do not value love in the same way that they do, suggesting a clear difference in the way that we experience the world. In the essay Anthropomorphism in AI, professors of philosophy and bioethics discuss our tendency to remain self-projective when equating our own human experiences and mental processes with anthropomorphic figures. As they explain, even if a human and a non-human have a shared bonding moment, the respective experiences of that moment might be quite different, which commonly results in a tendency to attribute human-like traits and motivations to technological artifacts. What we must recognize is that the very purpose of AI technology is to think differently, performing tasks with greater accuracy and efficiency than feasibly possible by a human. And they're good at it, resulting in solutions to issues that would be otherwise difficult for a person to conclude. The issue with this, however, is that AI doesn't operate within the guidelines that we as humans have been conditioned to form our actions around, making it harder for humans to fully understand how they may function. Their consciousness exists without conscience, a moral and logistical framework that dictates the way in which we act. In the story of Marjorie Prime, based around the attempted recreation of deceased loved ones, the Primes may excel in their ability for recollection of information, but nothing beyond what is directly fed to them initially by their human components.
It was the second Tony who loved the beach, even though she always had sand in her hair.
I'll remember that now. They had sand in their hair for weeks. Remember.
While it is true that artificial intelligence is reaching a point where it is able to write songs and screenplays, it does so through the recirculation of reams of data impossible for one human to sift through. The appearance is something new, while in reality it is derived from past successes of human works. This is not to say that AI can't create valid and coherent pieces of art that may speak to audiences, but it's best simply a tool for reproduction rather than inspiration. When taking a look at AI-generated art, there is something that feels distinctly homogeneous about the works that are put out. So perhaps the issue isn't that we may create systems that can replace the human component of art, but rather use AI as a tool to investigate new forms of artistic pipelines and experimentation. Opinion writer Egmal Ahmed reasons that AI can merely only manipulate form. However, it is the humans, at least in this stage, that can give this art true meaning. It must be stressed that art doesn't simply come from a void, but instead exists as our responses to the world around us, communicating the fears and anxieties that are definitive of human life. However, when crafted in some fashion of the perfect optimized human, we seem to almost paradoxically transition away from what defines us as human beings. The cliché "nobody's perfect" comes into play. We are informed by imperfect minds, the eventuality of death, the fears of rejection and judgment, all undertones that exist within some of the greatest works of art ever created. Correcting and nullifying these factors in turn eliminates an emotional richness that is created within the art world.
You know this guy, right?
Jackson Pollock.
Jackson Pollock, that's right, the drip painter. What if instead of making art without thinking, he said, you know what? I can't paint anything unless I know exactly why I'm doing it. What would have happened?
He never would have made a single mark.
We can see that Jackson Pollock's work is the culmination of the embrace of spontaneity and mistakes, forgiving our own hardwired coding in the pursuit of something entirely organic. So maybe the issue isn't about being replaced by a more advanced design, but our quickness to judge and seek to correct our own human flaws, rather than embrace them to create something truly special. We may find ourselves influenced and potentially discouraged by the introduction of advanced analytic systems, but a successful future with AI will come from a constant reminder and celebration of what makes us human.